Definitely thanks to the Creative Coach for letting me do this. Thank you, Jen. Have a good night. So welcome, guys. I guess this will be really informal since it's just us here. If you have any questions, just feel free to stop me whenever. So a little bit about myself. I own a company called Podcast on the Go, where I produce podcasts for local business owners, produce videography and video content creation, stuff like that. And these are my first 2 podcasts. I got into podcasting with the new agent edge. I was a real estate agent for a little bit, so I decided to start my own podcast, and I interviewed experts and entrepreneurs all over the city, all over the nation really, to try and figure out how to be a better agent. And then this was eMastercast. When I lived in Chicago, I started a mastermind, a lot like this. Once I go through this and we break into like a little small group and we'll collaborate. This is exactly what I did in Chicago, and it grew to like 600 people. We met once a month, had like 30 people show up every month. So I'm hoping to kind of recreate that here so that, you know, we can get to know each other a little bit better and start helping each other out. But both of those are still online, and you can find them, listen to them, check them out. I'm from North Carolina. I was a Tar Heel, grew up in a small town called Statesville, and I was a tuba player in the band, so that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm Tar Heel born and bred. That's my family right there. 2 little cute kids. One thing about my daughter, she does not like Santa Claus, so she's getting up out of there. Being a dad's important, so we'll skip through that.
So where'd you go to college?
Tar Heels, Carolina. Yes, UNC Chapel Hill. I'm sorry to hear that, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. Are you?
They used to win everything. Not now.
Are you from North Carolina then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, nice. Not far at all.
Okay.
Busy?
Yeah.
Ah, man.
All right.
They go hard.
That's right.
I'm Ohio State.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, so how many people here already listen to podcasts or started your podcast? Okay, so you listen. Okay, do you know like how they work and everything? You want me to go through this really quick? Okay, all right, so a podcast is basically a radio show for your interest, for your business, for your hobby, whatever it is. So it starts out, you record a file to your computer, you upload the file to a podcast host, right, which is something called like Podbean. I don't know if I can send you the notes and stuff, but it's Podbean, like podcast, BEAN, podbean.com. It's about $100 a year, so it's not that expensive. You upload it there, and from the host, it creates a link, and they send that link or that feed to every place you can listen to podcasts. So iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. There's a lot of different types of hosts. That's not the only one, but that's just the one I like to use. But so Spotify, what else is another one? Stitcher Radio. I know a lot of people hear about that. So those are the main ones. And then from there, you can share it to social media, to your website, to YouTube, to wherever you want it to go. Any questions about that? Pretty simple. So why is podcasting important? The biggest reason I got into business is because I saw the need for business owners to be able to tell their story. And like there's media, like traditional media, radio, TV, newspapers, magazines, but there's also something called new media now. And that's stuff like podcasting and YouTube channels and educational series and all those things. And that's the new market that Savannah just doesn't have a lot of. So that's why I started my business, because I saw a lane, a niche. So why is it important? A few stats. I'll run through these fairly quickly. But in 2018, so this is research done by Edison Research and Triton. You can't see it down at the bottom, but they have been for years, since 2008, but really before, they do advertising and marketing studies on a national level with every type of media, new media and advertising. But in 2008, when podcasting started, they broke off because they saw the rise and the success with a lot of podcasts. So they started doing studies specifically on podcasting. And right now, every month, 73 million podcasts are downloaded, estimated.
Well, you're off in 2013.
I don't know. That's right. Yeah, it's been increasing by.
How many podcasts are downloaded?
73 million per month. Yeah. And podcast listeners are more wealthy. They have a higher annual household income than the average population. So 51% are $75,000 to $150,000 or more of annual income as a household. So podcast listeners earn more money. Podcast listeners are more educated. It looks like almost 51%, 61%. I can't do that math that quick. But I have a 4-year degree or higher education, right? So they're educated. On average, people listen to 6 hours and 37 minutes of podcasts per week. And they listen to 7 different podcasts every week. And they listen to it at home, mostly, in the car, commuting. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Walking around, at work, at the gym, riding, public transportation. And most people, so it looks like 87% of people listen to most or all of the entire podcast. So that's, that's pretty incredible. So why is this stuff important? So for business owners, that means you're going to be getting in front of people who are educated, who are smart, who have income, who have, extra income, extra money to spend on the ads and the products that you're selling. It also means that people are going to be listening to everything you say. So if you put ads at the end, if you put ads at the beginning, if you are selling yourself, pitching your services in the middle of the podcast, they're going to hear that. They're not going to skip over. They're going to listen to it because they're doing it while they're commuting, while they're working out at the gym. They just want the content, and the ads are just, especially if it's coming from you. So the difference between a podcast ad and like a TV ad or a radio ad is that the pitch comes from the host 9 times out of 10. So that it's more of a recommendation from a friend, and people spend more money because of that versus versus an ad. So people see it a little bit stronger. So people spend more money on podcast ads. Welcome. You're fine. This is very laid back. So all that's really cool. And another thing I've noticed, and you guys might have noticed it too, but like whenever you listen to a podcast that you love, they kind of become your conscience a little bit, right? Because you're doing it while you're washing dishes, or you're going for a run, or you're driving and you're commuting. So that person, you kind of hear them and they become your conscience. And you listen to what they tell you just because they're plugged into your ears, while you're doing stuff that's kind of mindless, but they're still right there. And I think that's powerful, because then you're going to listen to their recommendations, and you're going to go to them when they say, when you tell them a service to do, or when you tell them to go to your website, check out this resource, they're going to listen to you. So that was really quick. So like what questions do you guys have about podcasting? And then I'll get to this really quick.
Platforms. Platforms.
What do you mean?
So if I'm going to start a podcast, what platforms do you recommend? What's the difference between those platforms? I'm sure it's like 2 or 3 most popular.
Yeah, you mean like iTunes? Well, is that what you mean, like where to publish it at?
I can't tell you what I mean.
Okay, so like iTunes. Okay, yeah, so iTunes is the main platform. So podcast, the pod comes from iPod. So like when podcasting first started, people would download the MP3 directly to their iPod. And that's where the podcast comes from. So that said, iTunes is the #1 place. That's where a lot of this data comes from, iTunes. And then Google Play is becoming big. Spotify is becoming big. And then what else? Well, I guess they call it Apple Podcasts now, but all of that stuff. Yeah, so once you upload it to the host, it'll send it out everywhere. Yeah. And then to get more listeners, you just share it on your social media and push it hard and do stuff like that. Yeah.
How did you find podcasting as like a creative research tool or like a motivational research tool to like find new topics to look into when you were starting your business? Like how integral was it to your creation of your business? And like real estate, you were communicating with all these other real estate agents and coming up with questions and actually have a direct source in front of you to gather that information.
Yeah. So the first podcast that kind of turned the light bulb on was something called EO Fire. He still does it, Entrepreneur on Fire.
Okay.
But he started it pretty early. I want to say 2012, 2010. Anyway, but he does a podcast every day. It's the same format. He asks the same 10 questions. He puts the ad in the same place every day. And he makes, he has a ton of listeners, and he came in at the right time. But I want to say he makes $400,000 net a month just from his podcast.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's So it's like from ads and sponsorships, but he also has, ads on his website, and he has a membership group on the back end. So that's where a lot of the money comes from. So I said, well, man, if I could just make a few thousand a month, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
And I think most business owners feel the same way.
Right.
But he puts all of his eofire.com, and you can see he puts his entire income and expense, his cash flow sheet on his website every month.
Oh, wow.
So you can see exactly where the money's coming in at. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great resource.
Yeah, definitely. EO Fire. I would check that out. Yes, sir.
In regards to podcasts, I wanted to know, have there been any successful podcasts that not only have podcasts, like they have a blog, vlog, and podcast, or is it like more known to just have the podcast?
I think just having a podcast is a great way to start, but you want to branch out as soon as you start to gain some steam, because you're going to get a lot more downloads from a podcast than you will from a YouTube channel or from anything else, a blog, starting out, because people can do it while they're commuting. They don't have to, they can do other things while they're listening to a podcast. So usually the numbers for a podcast versus a YouTube channel versus a blog are a lot higher than the other options. But I would definitely think about videoing your podcast even from the start, even if it's just one camera like I'm doing now. That way you can have multiple sources of content, right? So if you're already going to be sitting down doing an hour-long podcast, you might as well get some video of that, so you can put the video and audio together on YouTube. You can take the audio, put that in iTunes, then you can break them down even more, right? You can have a picture with a quote, put that on Instagram or Snapchat or something like that. You can take out clips and make a 1-minute promo for it. So it's like 1 hour of time you spend building it, but you can get so many different pieces of content to share out there. So that's a trick that some people call it the power of 5 or something like that. Every time you film something, make sure you pull out 5 pieces of content. I call it Razonomics, because my name's Raz. That's like a trickle down effect.
The Joe Rogan podcast, which is like the most popular podcast, it has like more viewers and listeners than CNN.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, and he does that. He will simultaneously live stream the podcast and the chat. But I've been listening to it for years, and I've never watched it once. but that's because that's how I'm connected to this through.
That's right.
When I'm doing something with my hands, I can have headphones in.
And it's crazy because I like to watch his actually.
Really?
Yeah, so I'll sit down and watch it, just have it on the background.
Yeah.
But just check back here.
Yeah.
What's up, Casey? Any other questions? I kind of sped through everything. I mean, I guess I could recap really quick. But any questions about podcasting? How'd you guys hear about podcasting, and why are you interested?
I'm more interested in how you can cater it toward like a fine art business. Like, for example, I'm a photographer, so I'm like really interested in knowing like how to put that into a podcast that's still entertaining and involves your audience.
Yeah. That's a good question, because you would kind of need, especially with art, you would need some type of video or picture to go with it. Yeah. So I would definitely it doesn't have to be a crazy good camera, but I would definitely get some type of camera and add it onto the podcast. That way people can listen, and then you have a resource to send them to after the podcast is over to, say go to my website and check out the video if you want to join in. Yeah. That's the way I would do it. But I don't know how to keep it entertaining.
I would look for it too, because I'm in the creative arts also. It's like, something that I can plug in and listen to where people are talking about process or technique or like a particular vendor product that they're using. And they kind of talk about troubleshooting it and their experience with it and stuff like that, like as a learning resource from people in photography. Like I find there's not a lot of that in the creative field. There's a lot for like entrepreneurship, real estate, and stocks and stuff like that. But I think the creative field really is lacking in the tutorial type podcasts.
I was playing with the idea of doing like a video about making a project and like seeing all the behind the scenes, and then seeing the actual day of like it all coming together. and like maybe having more background about me in there somewhere. I'm not really sure though, like how to space them all out and have different quality for each one.
Yeah. What do you guys think? How would you do an art podcast?
Is this the entrepreneur night?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Welcome. I'm Therese. Yeah. We'll stop in a minute. I already went through the slideshow, but we'll stop in a minute and we'll break off into groups and mastermind a little bit with each other to help each other's businesses. But does anybody else have like an idea? Because I'm not a teacher, so we're just gonna workshop it, right? Does anybody else have an idea of like what an art podcast could look like?
What an art podcast could look like?
Yeah, like how would you make that entertaining?
I would make it entertaining by having like, while I was in Miami, Florida, I seen this group create, they called it painting with a spliff. And like, I would say something like that, but more with wine. And like, you sit there and you drink and paint with the group and just banter amongst each other. Like, yeah, like just sit there and be like, my painting is gonna be way better than yours.
There's a used to have a right now on Bull Street where every month all the artists come together, and I'm artists. And we talk, and have them come in. We have wine, cheese, and stuff.
Nice.
So the camera there would be great.
Yeah, and that could be a great way to collaborate
And I'm sure
and get guests.
involved. They would love to be involved.
Definitely, yeah. So that could be an option. But a video would definitely have to be in there somewhere, or at least a camera. Yeah.
At least footage of the paintings when they're done. Like,
Who were
So
there?
like you're painting or photography?
I'm a photographer. So like if you want to like display them in the same way as a painting, you could do that also. I'm just not sure how to go about making like a podcast for it. Like another idea would be like you as a photographer and maybe two other people who are in the design field or maybe are photographers as well. Like you all could have like really banter, just like talk like.
Well, what's your goal as a photographer?
I would like to just branch out more right now. Since I'm beginning my business, I just want to meet as many people as possible and see where it goes. Ultimately, I would like to do magazine, fashion work, beauty work. I mean, I'm interested in every single type.
So if you did a podcast, you would want to almost make it to where you're becoming an authority as a photographer? Or would it be like to build community?
In a sense, both.
Okay. Because I think that both of those, you have different paths of how you handle your podcasting.
I agree. I think I need to pick one.
And you made a good point about authority. So that's my last little slide before we break off. When I first moved here, I helped Jesse Cole of the Bananas, the man in the yellow tux, helped him relaunch his podcast. And I came from, so I'm new here, been here 3 years. Didn't know anybody when I moved here. And through just like serendipity, I decided to start a radio show. So I volunteered at WRUU 107.5, and I've interviewed business owners from everywhere. Anyway, I reached out to Jesse, random email, first just got here. We hit it off, I interviewed him, and I ended up working on his podcast, helping him relaunch it. But from his podcast, I've seen on the back end, and this is like the secret. This is like the secret power podcast. If you're going to start one, I would definitely suggest interviewing authorities because of two reasons. Number one, it makes you look like an authority just by association. And number two is that the authorities want to help you. If you've, especially if you've done a good interview, like the stuff that people were, he was interviewing nationally recognized entrepreneurs, and they would just open up their minds, hearts, and everything to just give him things to help him grow and to help his business grow, whether it's resources, whether it's connections, their business book, like just everything. So, and that's just from a podcast. That's just from having a fun time on a podcast. So if you decide to start whatever your industry is, I would definitely throw some interviews in there somewhere of industry leaders, because that's the secret power of it. Yes, sir.
Can you define authorities? That's my first time hearing it.
Like authority, so like an influencer. That's what I mean by that.
Ambassador?
Like, no, like somebody who is already well recognized in whatever industry. Like, what industry are you in?
What industry am I in? I'm in industrial design, service design.
Okay, so like, who are the people you look up to in that industry?
The guy who designed the iPhone. I think his name is Johnny Ives.
Yeah, well, perfect. You know, that would be a perfect person to reach out to. You'd be surprised who will say yes to an interview. Trust me, you'd be very surprised. I've interviewed CEOs of huge companies that, you know.
Sometimes I feel like it's when you're really trying to if there's someone you really admire or you look after as far as your ideas or, you know, your business model, if you look at the people around them, that's what I do. I'm that person. I'm that person in the crowd. Just looking for your friends and your friends and your friends and your moms and your friends and your friends. You know, I'm looking at that. It's sometimes easier. I was trying to get to Bobby, B.O.B. I spoke. I couldn't get to B.O.B., but I got to his managers, his photographers. I got to his mother, all around him. Sometimes it's like to push in, send those messages out, and really pay attention if you want to get to it.
That's right. And then it's with podcasts, you have a way to give them something.
Yeah,
because you're giving them a platform.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're giving them a platform to share their story. And if you're a good interviewer, if you're like really interested, it's not even about being a good interviewer. It's just about asking questions that show that you care, you know, and that you're there. Like the worst interviewers are the people who just ask the same questions every time, and you go on their show and it's like, you know, you don't have any kind of connection and they just want to get through it. But the good interviewers are the people who really sit there and kind of block everything else out, and it's just you and him or you and her, you know, for that time. Yeah. What's your podcast idea?
My name is Katrina Turner. I'm a personal finance stewardship coach.
Okay.
And I just launched my podcast in January.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm new at everything. Like how long should it be? Right now I haven't had any interviews. It's just been me. Last month the thing was just talking about, I just get back to the basics and trying to help families get out of bed, create a spending plan, save for a rainy day. So January was the perfect time to kind of tap in on that for people's New Year resolutions.
Yeah.
So that was my thing. This month I did it on marriage and money, and I haven't had as much traction as I did in January, probably because New Year. So I guess one of my questions that I had is how long was the average? You may have already answered this. About how long should a podcast be on average? And you answered the other one about interviewing authorities. Should it be me or should I interview other people? And then my second one, I heard you talking about this one. My third one, I heard you talking about this one. I was kind of in, how do I make money off of podcasting? Because right now I'm just trying to, I started blogging first, and then I started reading about how podcasting is like the new blogging. So I wanted to kind of get into that side of it, but I'm trying to really grow like my subscribers list and just to become the authority when it comes to personal finance.
Yeah. First of all, don't get burned out. Okay. You know, most podcasts, I think the majority of podcasts fail after episode 7. They just shut down. Yeah. So I don't know where you are yet.
Well, one thing that I knew I wouldn't have the time to do every week, so I've been doing it bi-weekly. Perfect. So that fits more with my schedule. Yeah. So I've been on the top of things.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So first of all, don't get burned out. It takes a long time to get going and get growing. So you got to stick in there so people can hear you and you can start to snowball. I have a great guest for you right here that would love to come on your show. She's also a financial. Yeah. So she could be your first guest. Yeah, and the first question was, so one question was, how do you make money? It's a lot of avenues to make money off podcasting. If you're just starting out, you're not gonna have the numbers to like really go out there and, ask a big business or do something like, whether the audible.com is a big one, audiobooks. That's what's the word I'm looking for?
Just as a sponsor?
Yeah, but it's another word for it. I can't think of the word right now. But anyways.
Affiliate?
That's it, affiliate, yeah, that's affiliate sponsor. But what I would do is I would think about the people you spend the most money with personally, and ask them if they would want to sponsor your podcast. Even if it's just $100 a month, $50 a month, however much. Especially if you're giving them your money all the time, they should want to support you. Or if you're sending them clients all the time, they should want to support you as well. And then you can give them like a mid-roll 30-second ad or type thing. Another option is I think it's midroll.com, and that's what a lot of the bigger podcasts use, and they kind of give you what to expect from 10,000 downloads a month. How much money you should expect from that. Yeah, but it takes a while. There's another question I left out. How long? Short answer is whatever you can do consistently. Because I've heard successful podcasts that are 5 minutes long. I've heard successful podcasts like Joe Rogan's that can be 2.5, 3 hours long. Yeah, every day. He's interviewing people.
This is the hardcore history, Dane Carvin.
Yeah.
Like 5 hours long.
Yeah.
And it's one of like 8 episodes.
Mm-hmm. And it's really
all about the same subject.
And it's really good. But he doesn't put his out like once every 5 months or something like that.
Yeah. He also monetizes by he releases some that are always available for free.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you want like the backlog of all of them, then you have to subscribe and pay for.
Yeah. But I think it's on like $1 an episode.
Yeah, I mean that's a reasonable price. But at the volume that he has listeners, that $1 per episode is really.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say anywhere from 20 minutes. That's like the average commute time, 20 or 30 minutes to an hour. Yeah. Yes, Mark.
Question regarding equipment. That's one question. Microphones, if you're going to videotape it, equipment might be best to use. And then the second one is distribution. Once you have it captured, editing, and then where best to post it. I know that you post yours on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. YouTube. So YouTube, iTunes, Google Play. If you have a podcast, I mentioned this earlier, but you can put in like a podcast host. It's back here somewhere. So after you've recorded, edited all that good stuff, you upload it to the podcast host, which is something like Podbean or Libsyn. And then you can go from the podcast host to everywhere you want it to. Yeah, so it goes from there to iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and it's just like one time you have to set up an account, and then every time you upload a new episode, it'll go. Yeah. What was the first? Did I answer the first one?
Equipment.
Okay, equipment. Microphone. You need a really good microphone. I always recommend the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. It's on my website, but I could share the link with you later. But it's usually around $70, but it has a USB input, so you can just go right to your computer, or it has a headphone mic right into the headphone, so you can hear everything, or the XLR. I'm sorry, yeah, the Audio-Technica ATR. Yeah, 2100. Yeah, and I've had one of those for like 4 years now, and it's still doing great.
And what's the price?
Around $70. It fluctuates. Yeah, it fluctuates on Amazon.
Fashion, photography, cameras.
Yeah.
The high-end.
So 70 is not that bad, or you said it's a lot?
It's great.
Okay, yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, okay.
That's the Yeti. That's the THX. And kind of the
Yeah, or the high-old PR50, something like that. It's like 1,300, 1,200. So they can get up there. But if you're starting out, you want to sound great, I would start with the Audio-Technica, for sure.
sound quality really kind of it's how you're presenting yourself too. Don't be afraid to go a little further in on sound quality because you're going to sound clearer, more professional.
That's right.
Somebody kind of talking in a tin can.
Yeah, and people will not listen to your podcast if it sounds bad.
Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves.
Right. They will not listen, no matter who's the guest or what you have on there.
One thing, I don't know if you were finished with him, but I really want to find out names of podcast hosts.
Okay, Podbean is one. This is the one I like to use. It's like $113 for a year of hosting, and you can upload unlimited. Or you have Libsyn is like the go-to that most people recommend because it's just, and it can go anywhere from $5 to $50 a month or more. Yeah.
Those are the main two?
Those are the main two I recommend. There's a lot more out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And these pretty much act like say a DistroKid or like music distributor, like DistroKid, what's it called, TuneCore, but for podcasts?
I don't know what those are.
Never mind.
But probably. Yeah, it's just kind of like distribution, right? That's where you upload it and then it distributes it out to everywhere you can listen to a podcast. But if you're talking about like marketing and stuff, that's a whole other thing that I don't even know that much about. I know a little bit about, but I'm not good at it.
Is that what you do as your business? Is you'll go to companies or go to individuals, entrepreneurs, and help them kind of make that leap into podcasting?
That's right.
Set them up the right way.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what. So I have all the equipment in my trunk, basically. So I come to you. I have a mixer I'll set up. I have 4 or 5 mics I can set up so you can have a bunch of people on. Yeah. I have the video camera. We can live stream it. We can record it and edit it later. Yeah. So I do all the back end stuff. I do the content creation.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you what is that just price range wise? Like, how do you structure it? Is it like hourly? Is it kind of
hourly? Yeah. So per hour, it'll be like around 100 to 200, depending on what you want. If you just want me to edit it, it's like 50 to 60. Okay. But within the hour, we can record, 1 podcast, right, 2 podcasts, 3 podcasts, yeah, and then I could just, batch it up for you like that to make it a little more, nice, a little more affordable. Yeah. Versus 200, instead of doing like $200 an episode. Right. Yeah.
What's the great way?
Welcome.
Hi, I'm my ticket on my phone.
You're fine. Just pop
here.
Oh man.
Can you go over the prices one more time, please?
Yeah. So for me to come to you and do everything, it's like $150 an hour to $200 an hour that we can talk. But within that hour, we can record up to 3 or 4 episodes to make it more, so it's like, so it'd really be more like $200 a month. Yeah, that type of thing.
Now, when you were mentioning about, taking that hour but then cut, does that include the video as well as the audio? So then can you help with consulting on cutting to, so you can take some images to use for other branding? Because for me, podcasts will be more just trying to build a brand. And so I can consult things like on the marketing side, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely can. I mean, I can tell you the basics, of course. Okay. Yeah.
I think on the same platform, I have a clothing brand.
Okay.
I'm in real estate too. However, my clothing brand, of course, I have a clothing brand, things that I say where I want to capture that, those moments in different ways. I think that over the period of time, it's possible. I think that's
awesome.
As far as getting your podcast out there, like search engines and stuff like that, how do you post it in a way that you have hashtags or keywords or a way to drive, like when people are researching something that your podcast is on and searching that it'll come up?
YouTube is key. Yeah. I want to say that I think so. iTunes is key. Making sure that and I can definitely help you set that up because there's little tricks and stuff whenever you set up your host to make sure that the subtitles and titles of your podcast are, have the main keywords you want in there. Right. And it's like little tricks where you can say, even if you don't interview, what was the guy's name that created the iPhone?
John Ives.
Yeah, John Ives. So even if you don't interview John Ives, you can say, I interview guests like John Ives or like this. So it's a keyword in there, right? It's a little trick, but that way people search for John Ives, they'll find your podcast as well. So it's just little tricks like that. But YouTube is big because it's a huge search engine. It's connected to Google and your website.
Is that something that the podcast host does, like Podbean, like when it sends them out to the different resources for podcasts? Is that kind of included in that dispersion?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, somewhat. Yeah. Yes, I'll get you first.
When you upload the information or the podcast to YouTube, is that a video or is that audio or is it a mixture of both?
It can be either. You have to have at least a JPEG image attached to it for it to be on YouTube. Yeah, so that's something you could put together in Final Cut Pro or Premiere Pro or whatever video editing software you have.
Are you doing video or are you just doing the audio?
I try to do video. Okay. Yeah, I try to do video too when I get a chance. Yes.
So I'm working on, as a service designer, I help people design services. and I'm working with this group to design like a podcast. And so far I've gathered like all the resources as far as like people to do film, people to do audio, like with equipment and whatnot. With your service with Podcasts on the Go, would you like train us on how to properly create podcasts, or are you just there to do the podcast yourself?
I won't be on the podcast, that's what you mean. I'm just there to like film it and produce it for you. And if you want me to coach you on it, yeah, I can definitely help you with that. But I mean, really, yes, I can help you with like some basic stuff. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Because it's got to be your niche. It's got to be your personality that's going to attract people to it. So like whatever you want to do, you should at least try it, because it's just a creative outlet at the end of the day.
Because I was curious as far as pretty much making the whole process cohesive. Because for me and everybody else who's on the team, nobody's ever done a podcast before.
Okay.
So like I'm looking at it from like a designer's perspective, where I can do the research and do whatever I need to do. But I feel like if I had somebody to show me how to do it one time, me and my team would be able to like pick up where you left off. Would you be able to help with that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So before we break off into like smaller groups, welcome. I think so. Yeah, the entrepreneurship. No, you're fine. You're fine. It was a slow night. It's Valentine, so happy Valentine's. What was the interest in podcasting for y'all? Is there an interest in podcasting?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, so you think about starting one for real estate? Okay, cool. That was my first podcast, a real estate podcast.
Yeah.
Where it was called The New Agent Edge, and I interviewed local real estate experts from around the country. But it failed at 7 episodes.
Yours was for people just getting started out as agents, a resource for new agents. Like when my wife and I bought our house a few months ago, like a month when we decided to buy a house, I started looking for real estate podcasts just to find resource information from real estate agents about what the process is. So it would have been great to have one here locally,
right?
Kind of more tailored to.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the key to starting a podcast, is to find that niche, because you can, if you search for real estate, there'll be 1,000 different episodes on mortgages and investment and all this stuff. But if you say like Savannah, first time home buyer real estate podcast, it's a long title, but you know, the more people find it.
You send out emails. At that point, you send out emails.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Cool. And you came in mid-sentence for me too, so welcome.
Sorry, I parked over on Bay, and I knew it was going to be that long to walk.
Oh, man.
Walk down and locate.
Man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. I was surprised you made it.
Sorry, you can ride back to my car when you really over here. I just moved here from Utah to Beaufort.
Okay.
And
that's a change.
Yeah, oh my God, thank you. Oh my God, it's like snowing there and stupid, and I don't want to ever see snow again, so, or Mormons. So anyway, sorry. I don't want to.
This is on Facebook Live, so. What is your interest in podcasting?
My interest is that I really like to contribute to the community there in Beaufort, and I would like to go to the businesses, like the local business owners, and interview them and just give them more exposure, especially like the small business owners, because they always need a leg up, just to give the community information, because when I moved there was nothing to give me any information about the area. I searched for like low country podcasts. I found like a couple, but they must have stopped because I only found a few episodes here and there. And like the ladies at the library have one, but it's only on like religion and books. So I'm really interested in, just helping other businesses grow.
Yeah. That's a great idea. That's what I did when I first moved here, and that's through, especially with Savannah and the Low Country being such a tight knit community. Once you start helping other people, then doors just open like crazy.
Boom.
Yeah. So that's a great idea.
I think location period. Really great about that. I've been here for 3 years. I said connected with this center period. The last 2 years. If I have any questions, anyone I need, from social media to any questions here. Come here and they give me the connections. I mean, phone numbers and emails. And I have that.
What is this place here? What is it?
Oh, so this is it's called the Labs now, but it used to be Bull Street Labs, and it's the Creative Coast. It's kind of a mix of things, but it's co-working space.
Oh.
Yeah, co-working space.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Does it cost anything?
Yes. Yes, but it's not bad. It's not that bad. Yeah.
Every other Friday?
Yeah.
Every second Friday is free Friday.
That's right. Yeah. So I would definitely check that out.
The next Friday will be free Friday.
Yeah. Free. And you get
You need it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Sometimes early in the day, we have meetings that are free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, they're not going to charge you to come walk into the office.
Right.
To your question.
Right.
There's
And
questions.
I'm off the questions because I like
Yeah.
respect because of that. I'm a hustler. She hustles. I'm impressed. She hustles.
nice.
I spoke.
Cool. Well, thank y'all for coming. We will break off into like small groups now. What time is it? 6:30. About that time. Well, if you have to go, you can go. If you want to stay, we can break off into small groups. So